Song. It's good to be in the house of the Lord tonight. We've enjoyed the service thus far, and it is good to have my wife Deborah with me tonight. I had no idea I'd be going home today, but all at once things began to happen this morning, and I realized I was going to have to go home and take care of some business, and I decided to bring her back with me when I did, and I'm glad that I did that. Well, let's look to the word of the Lord tonight. We've already had some victory here, and we trust the Lord's not done with us yet. Psalms 91. Psalm 91. And I want to begin tonight in the 11th verse. Psalm 91, 11. For he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Because he has set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. Heavenly Father, we are grateful for another service that you have given us and for the victories that have already been won. We thank you for the testimonies that have been given tonight and the singing and all that's happened already. We praise your holy name. We appreciate traveling mercies through the snow today and back again. And now, Lord, our hearts are set on this scripture, and we've never learned to preach much on our own. We depend upon thee. May thy holy will be done, and we'll praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, in the 11th verse, we have a very beautiful picture, and that picture is this, that the angels of God have taken us in charge. It is their duty to look out for us. And every one of us has an angel or two, or some of you may need many more than that. I told one fellow that I know recently, he's very accident prone. He's always into something, falling off somewhere, doing something. And I said, they started a nursing home in heaven for all the guardian angels you've already worn out. And yet I know that wasn't really so. I was just kidding. You know, when we begin to think about it, angels don't get old, they don't get sick, they don't die. And so the angels that watched out over the Old Testament greats are still somewhere tonight. The angels that were in deliverance to Daniel and the angels that were in deliverance to others are doing works of mercy even now and perhaps have aided some of us even today. The angels have charge over us. The angels in heaven are charged with the keeping of the saints of God, and when no danger seems to be lurking, they are there. I remember some time ago now, we were coming across the top of Pennsylvania and Ohio, and I don't know which state we were in when this happened, but one of them. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. We were pulling our trailer and just running along as fast as the speed would allow us to. And all at once I saw way up ahead of us the antlers of a huge buck. And I immediately began to slow down. I didn't want to hit that big boy. And I saw him plainly in my lights, and I saw him go down into the median and up across and out of our way. And I pushed back down on the foot feed again. And just that quick, another car came up over the ridge from the other direction. That buck turned back around and came right out in front of us. And my wife said, "Jesus, help us." And just that quick, we hit that deer. I mean, we hit him. And broke all of our headlights out and crushed the front of our van in. And I lost control of the vehicle and went down over in the median on the right side. And I mean, I went down over the median, higher than this platform, much higher. And couldn't see a thing. I had, all I could see was my brake lights were illuminating my trailer, and I saw that it was up on 2 wheels. And I thought, oh my, this thing's going to turn over. And we had a Reese hitch, and they always make the claim that if your trailer turns over, the truck's going to too, because they don't come unhooked. And so I thought, well, we're going over here. But I thought, I got to hold on the steering wheel and keep us from hitting something else that I may not see. And of course, I couldn't see anything. So I was just hanging on for the ride. But you know what? We got down in there, and we didn't hit anything. And before I even come to a stop, I thought, you know what? I drove this rig off of here. I'm going to drive it back up on that road. And I turned the wheels back up that direction, and you can't do this with a Ford van. You can't do it. Ford vans are helpless, even in wet grass. I've been hung up in wet grass at camp meetings in the summertime with that thing. And so I just gave it the gas and started back up that hill, and I want you to know I pulled that rig back up on top of the interstate again. My wife called 911, and the police came, and he said, what happened? I said, well, we hit a deer. My trailer was completely covered in blood. He said, where's he at? I said, I don't know. I said, he's bound to be laying here dead someplace. But we couldn't find him. I didn't much care. But you know, the police said that this thing's still running. It shouldn't have been. It was all crushed up. He said, this is still running? I said, yeah. He said, well, let me tell you. He said, you just follow me to the next exit. Guess what was there? A nice motel. We pulled in there for the night. The next morning, I got up, and I felt rambunctious, I guess. I went out and climbed in the back door, climbed over the seat. We couldn't open the front doors, and I put the key in the ignition, and that thing started. I went back and told her, I said, let's drive this home. We were 4 or 5 hours from home. She said, well, do you think it'll make it? I said, well, if it don't, we'll just be stranded closer to home than we are now. So we got in that thing, and I want you to know, we drove that all the way back to Indiana. I wore a set of brand new tires out coming home on the front and wore them clear down bald. But we got that rig home. And you know, I thought, God, you had to be in this. You saved me a towing bill for my trailer and my truck both on this deal. And you kept us from getting hurt, and our trailer wasn't hurt. It was almost brand new then. I think we'd just been out like 3 weeks with our new trailer. And everything just worked out. But I remember as my wife saw we were about to hit that deer, she said, Jesus, help us. And you know what? I believe the angels came and watched out over us that night and kept other cars from hitting us and other people from being involved, because the angels have been given us in charge. One writer said the angels have affections for us, and they're comparable to the affections of a grandfather with his grandchild. Wow. When I read that, I thought, man, I have got it absolutely made. If the angels love me and watch out for me as much as I do my grandchildren, then I have absolutely got it made. I've got a little granddaughter now. I've got a lot of grandsons, but I got one little granddaughter that's absolutely captured my heart. I'll go to their house, and she comes up and says, Pappy, play. She's 22 months old. She gets a hold of my hand and pulls me toward the bedroom. She's got a little table and chairs just her size. She says, sit. I said, honey, I can't sit on that. She says, sit, Pappy. And guess who sits on the little chair? I'm just like the Goldilocks in the story, sitting down on Baby Bear's chair. Oh, I tell you what, that little thing's got me wrapped around her heart. She'll call me up and babble on the phone. I don't know what she's even said, but I just start bawling because she's my girl. And you know what? I thought, if the angels are out for us the way we are for our grandchildren, then we've got it made, haven't we? But all at once, the picture changes. The picture changes in the next verse from angelic care in verses 11 and 12 to this business of treading. In verse 13, it says, thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Now, in the praise and worship hymnal on page 209, there is a song that's called He Rolled the Sea Away. And it may be in this big hymnal here, I'm not sure. In Indiana, we call this Sing to the Lord the big hymnal. And so that's what I call it. And I don't know if that song is in this hymnal or not. Perhaps it is. But there is a phrase in there. It says, with a conquering tread, we will push ahead. He'll roll the sea away. What is the conquering tread anyway? It alludes to a custom back in the days of Bible kings, that they would go in and if you captured a kingdom, you would bring that king back to your kingdom in chains. You would perhaps bring the generals of the army that you had conquered back in chains. And then you would cause them to go in the deepest and filthiest dungeon in the kingdom and exchange clothing with the meanest and nastiest person in that dungeon. And out they would come dressed in the rags of some filthy slave or criminal. Then they would be marched through the streets in some sort of a triumphal march. They would pass before a great reviewing stand where the conquering king would be seated, where the conquering generals would be seated. Then they would cause those people to be put onto the ground at spear point. And there lays the former king, the former great general of some conquered nation in the dust. And the king would get up from his throne and come down off of the dais there. And he would put his sandaled foot against the neck of the conquered king and press his face into the dirt while the crowd would roar. They had conquered this king. That's the conquering tread. You get your big foot on it. The scripture says here that we'll be able to tread upon the young lion and the adder, the conquering tread. And in all of the beasts that are listed here, there is something for us here tonight. We see in these beasts the ability of the people of God to be able to get their conquering tread upon the things that are troubling them, the things that are planning to destroy them and harm them. God has given us that ability here in the Psalms, and it's a beautiful picture. Let's first of all look at the lion. The lion would represent to us tonight the sudden and crushing tragedies which spring upon the saints of God. Now, the lion isn't the biggest animal that God made, but he is nimble and ferocious and strong. I mean to tell you, when a lion roars, when he opens that toothy mouth and lets out that low growl, every animal in the woods scratches gravel to get into a hollow log somewhere because he's the lion. When I was in South Africa, I was messing around one day, and I drove out through the country, and I saw this big sign that said that there was, I believe it was a 10,000 acre animal reserve. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to check this out. And I had another minister with me. We drove back there, and we found out for $15 they would put us in a Jeep and drive us over that 10,000 acres and let us see all these animals in their natural habitat. So I said, I'm up for this. So we drove up. They said, well, you got to go back to this house back here and da-da-da-da-da. So we drove back the lane, and when we pulled up to this house, it just looked like a house, a farmhouse. 5 lions came out. And I said to my friend, I said, I'm not getting out. He said, I'm not either. And they just came and stood around the car. And about that time, a lady came out on the porch, and she said, they won't bite. I said, are you sure? She said, oh, no. She said, they won't bite. I said, are you absolutely sure? She said, I'm telling you, they won't bite you. So we got out, and I eased out the door. And 2 of them come around. They was about this tall. They were big cubs. And one of them put his cold, have you ever had a cold, snotty nose of a lion in the palm of your hand? That's what I had, a cold, snotty nose. And I didn't even move a muscle as I walked to the house real slow with those big lion cubs. And she thought that was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. Now she said, now don't you mess with their mom and daddy. She said, they're in the backyard. But she said, if you want to see them, she said, you just slip around the corner of the house. I said, well, I don't need to see them right now. She said, no, go ahead. She said, I've just thrown them the hind quarter of a calf. She said, they're too busy eating to mess with you. They'll be all right. So I slipped around the back of the house and peered around the corner, and sure enough, the king of beasts himself was sitting there with the hip socket of that calf. And he was chewing the meat off of that man. And I mean, he was holding it in his front paws and had his head sideways, grinding down on that. And I thought, wow, the king of beasts, the lion. The lion. In the book of Judges, chapter 14, and I might just invite you to turn over there with me. The book of Judges. Joshua, Judges, Ruth. What is Ruth doing judging Joshua anyway? That's what one fella said. Or what's Joshua doing judging Ruth? In the book of Judges, chapter 14, we read the story of Samson. Samson has decided he's going to marry this girl that he's found. And he has invited his parents to go down and meet her. He says in verse 3 of chapter 14, she pleaseth me well. Verse 5, then Samson went down and his father and mother to Timnath, came to the vineyards of Timnath, and behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid, but he had nothing in his hand. But he told not his father or mother what he had done. You know, you're not going to get too far along the road to the marriage supper of the Lamb until you too will encounter the lion. Samson had gone down there expecting later to take part in a wedding, but on this day he is surprised as a young lion roars against him. He had no instruments of warfare in his hand, but the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, the Bible says, and he rent that lion as he would have rent just a young kid from the flock. And the Scripture says that he told not his father or mother what he had done. Now, I don't know, but surely the lion must have got a swipe or two in with his big paw before Samson did him in. There must have been a little blood. There must have been some torn clothes or something. But apparently Samson is able to put all of this away to such an extent that his parents do not realize that he has just killed a lion. Now, I just want to tell you, if I kill a lion tonight after church, I'm telling about it in the morning. That's the bottom line. And you know what? Deer hunters are this way. You boys and girls, the girls are big deer hunter now as the boys are. These kids, they get out and they kill these big bucks. And I mean, the first thing they do is hunt for their cell phone. Click, 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 click. Send all. Then they throw these things in their truck and haul them all over town all day. I was driving through Ohio some time ago, and I think it's been a couple years at least. It was real desperately cold. And we were on our way to Pennsylvania to a meeting, and my wife was kind of dozing over there. And all at once, here come a car. And I don't know if you know what a Ford Fiesta is. How many are understanding that? It's a skateboard on wheels, more or less. This dude in a Ford Fiesta had killed a moose out west somewhere and had that moose draped over that car. And all you could see was the moose coming down the road. It was unbelievable. I don't know what was keeping. I told my wife, he's got to have a 4x4 holding that roof up in there. I don't know how that happened. And I said, where's your camera? She said, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, get your camera out. There's a moose over here. But you know what? By the time we put it all together, the moose was gone. But I'll never forget that. It was like this guy driving along, he's waving at me. He was like, I got a moose. And you know, it must have taken a lot of something that I don't know what to call to keep from talking about that. You know, sometimes, kids, the lion that almost gets us is the one we don't want to talk about. And some of you may be facing issues in your life. Things that you can't even tell your best buddy. Say, man, if they found this out about me, or if they knew what I was battling right now, if they knew the extent of how dark this was right now, they wouldn't even believe it. Some of the lions that are tragic are things that cannot be discussed. They can't be talked about. Well, as Samson went on down there, and that's another whole story too, but later on, here they come back. And as they're coming back past the place where the lion almost got him, curiosity got a hold of Samson, and the scripture says that, verse 8, after a time he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took thereof in his hands, and went on eating, and came to his father and mother, and he gave them, and they did eat. But he told them not that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. He comes along now, and here is bees coming in and out of the carcass of this lion. And this is not going to happen in natural life. It's against everything bees believe in. Okay? It's against everything bees believe in to do something like this, but here they are. They have filled the carcass of this old lion with honey. And Samson reaches down and grabs into that honey, and while the honeycomb is dripping off his hands, he's tasting this. He says, wow, this is fantastic. I want to share with my parents. There wasn't Walmart around. There wasn't Olive Garden and things like that where you could stop and eat, or McDonald's or anything else. They were out in the middle of nowhere. This all at once becomes a source of refreshment to Samson. This lion that almost got him later on becomes a source of refreshment, not only for him, but for his parents as well. And he still doesn't tell them. This would have been a great time to say, Mom and Dad, I killed him. I did him in. But he doesn't. He keeps it. You know, we don't do that in the holiness movement. People come to prayer meeting. They bring their lions to prayer meeting. They get up and tell what almost got them. They get up and tell. Some of them even bring their lions with them on chain. They're not dead yet. Lions in our life. I remember years ago, I was at that place where I had to cut the wood that I told you about the other night. And we had an awful time making it there from week to week, just to live, to eat, and do things that we needed to do. And my little boy's birthday came up while we were there. He turned 6 that year, and he was starting first grade. And on his birthday was the first day of school. So I walked him down to school, and he had been bugging me for about 3 or 4 weeks that he wanted a bike for his birthday. And every time he mentioned it, I tried to change the subject because I didn't have the money to buy him a bike. And I was just dreading this day to come. And on the day of his birthday, I walked him down to school, and he said, Dad, I know you got me a bike hid somewhere. And I was thinking, oh, my. He said, Dad, you knew, he said, I've been wanting a bike. And you're not going to let me down, Dad. I know you're not. Ooh, we didn't even have the money to buy a cake mix to bake him a cake. That's how desperate the situation was. And so here's what I said to him, and I chose my words carefully. I said, Andy, when you get out of school, we're going to do something for your birthday. And that's exactly what I was going to do something. I was going to take him to a state park. I was going to take him somewhere. We're going to hike. We're going to do something. But it didn't include a bike, and it didn't include a cake. And, man, he cheerfully went off into school. And all the way home, I was just feeling miserable and low down and desperate. And I said, now, Lord, you saw what just happened. And I don't need a bike at all, but he needs one. He's going to be desperately disappointed if he don't get one. And if there's anything you can do today to cause this to happen, I'd really appreciate it if you'd do it. Well, about the time I got to the house, my parents drove up, and my mom and dad hardly ever came to see me. And they lived a long ways away, I think maybe 18 miles. And they hardly ever came. But on this day, my mom and dad drove up, and in the back of my dad's truck was a bicycle. And You'd have to understand my dad. My dad's never going to buy a new bicycle, let me just tell you that. He bought this one at a garage sale or an auction. It was a Stingray. And those are, if you had one now, they're worth some money. But in the day that Andy was coming up, a Stingray was the biggest piece of junk that you could ever come up with. It had a banana seat on it, and it had the handlebars. You had to reach straight out and get a hold of them. It was the most awkward thing. You couldn't hardly turn it. It would turn too sharp. You'd crash. It was an awful thing. And plus, my dad loves John Deere green. He had painted that bike John Deere green. Wheels, tires, seat, handlebars, and all. John Deere green. But it was a bike. My mother got out of her side of the pickup, and she had a 5-layer homemade strawberry cake on a cake plate. And our prayers were answered. My little boy I wondered what he'd say when he saw the green Stingray. He said, "Whoa, cool!" He said, "Dad, help me learn to ride." And my dad and I pushed that little dude back and forth, a little wobbly 6-year-old boy leaning clear out like this, trying to learn how to drive a bike. But he learned that day, learned how to drive that bike. We ate that cake. I thought it was the worst birthday he ever had. Years later, Andy said to me one day, Dad, you know what my favorite birthday of all time? I said, no, I wouldn't have any idea. He says, the year I got the bike, the green bike. He said, that was my best birthday ever. Oh, wow, the year that we almost starved to death. The year that we used to go down to the dump to see if the grocery store had brought anything out. We did that. The year we used to sit around on Wednesday night and hope somebody would give us 90 cents so we could get a small cheese pizza from the gas station. That was his favorite year. Same year, Christmas times rolled around now. And we didn't have money to get a Christmas tree, but we wanted one, and I wanted a big one if I could find one. And I started asking around, anybody's got any trees on their property? No. Finally, somebody said, I know somebody's got a tree on their property. They will pay you to take it. And I said, well, who are they? Where do they live? And he told me, and I went out and knocked on the door, and I said, somebody told me you had a Christmas tree that you'd like to give away. He said, well, I got a tree to give away, but he said, you have to use your imagination a whole lot for it to be a Christmas tree. I said, well, where is it? He said, right up there on that bank, and it was just a big ball. It didn't have a top. You just didn't really know where it started and where it stopped. It was just a ball. And I said to my wife, what do you think? She said, well, it's better than the one we got, which was none. So we sawed this thing down, and the trunk on the bottom was this big around, and I pulled it up on top of our little car. A 2-door little thing, some kind of a little Ford thing. And it draped clear over the car. You couldn't even see the cars like the Moose episode. And we started toward town, and it would blow off. And I'd get it and put it back up there. And finally, a guy stopped me. He said, hey, you having trouble? I said, yeah. He said, I'll haul that tree for you. So he put it in the back of his pickup and hauled it to the parsonage. And I got out in front, and I pulled, and I pulled, and I pulled, and I pulled. The thing was 9.5 feet across. But it was only about 6 feet tall. And I pulled and pulled, and I got that baby in there. And I said, you know what? We're going to have to move the furniture out of this room. So we put the furniture in another room and set that tree up right in the middle of this room. It was like having a forest in the house. We only had 2 or 3 sets of lights, and we, kind of did something with them. And man, the kids were dancing around. I had, Andy was 6, and my little girl was maybe 2.5 or 3, and she was all excited, and we got it up, and then we got the Lego blocks out and dumped them underneath of it. And I got the Matchbox cars and dumped them out. Man, we laid under that tree and played every night the whole Christmas season. We played under the tree. I could get completely under it and not even be seen. One night the phone rang, and I had the phone under there too. I answered the phone. I said, Bible Covenant Parsonage. The lady said, you know what? She said, is this the preacher? I said, yes. She said, the Baptists brought us a Christmas tree. I said, good for them. She said, but not one present did they bring to put under it. I said, terrible news. She said, do you think the Bible covenant could bring us some presents to put under our tree? I said, I doubt it. I sincerely doubt it. I said, I'm laying under my tree right now. And I said, there is not one present under here and not a hope of one. She said, oh. She said, you couldn't bring us a cake nor a pie? I said, lady, I haven't seen a cake or a pie since Thanksgiving myself. She said, I better call another church. I said, you better. Yeah, that's how it was. Christmas Eve come. Not one present did we have. My wife said, honey, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know. But I went down in the basement and made some stuff out of wood and painted it. And I had a little village and I had some stuff. But, you know, kids kind of understand sometimes that you're not getting them anything much when you give them little blocks of wood you gathered up down to the lumber yard, you know. So I was really troubled about it. But on Christmas Eve, somebody from our church stopped and gave us $10. Oh, we were so thrilled. We went on a shopping trip, and we went to one of these stores where you can buy everything just about for $1. And we bought 10 things, 5 things for Krista, 5 things for Andy. And we wrapped them up with some wrap that we'd had left, I guess, from the year before. And on Christmas Eve, we put them to bed, and we put those 10 little things under that tree. And I mean, I looked at her and she looked at me and we just bawled. This is the worst Christmas we ever had. It was horrible. But you know, the kids were just so happy the next morning and thrilled with that. And we just kind of pushed it under the rug as quick as we could and got on with life. Years later went by. Andy's grown up and got kids of his own. And one night we were sitting around. Andy said, Dad, now this is his own language, okay? I'm just quoting him. He said, do you remember? He said, Dad, do you know what my favorite Christmas of all time was? He's always doing this. The favorite hunt, the favorite this, the favorite that. I said, I have no idea. I said, was it the year I got you the double-barrel shotgun? I thought that might be a winner. No, that wasn't it. I said, was the year I got you that big fishing outfit from Cabela's? No. He said, it's the year we had that big, huge monstrous, that's what the word he made up, that big, huge monstrous Christmas tree. And he said, we played under it every night. He said, Dad, that was by far the best Christmas we ever had. What? That was the year we almost starved to death. But now we're eating honey out of that carcass. The place that we thought was going to kill us. Some time ago we was driving along. I said, honey, you know what one of my favorite places we pastored was? She said, no, but I know what mine is. I said, what was yours? She said, Marengo. I said, that's mine too. That's the place where we ate out of the garbage. One day I used to sweep chimneys. I weighed 126 pounds. Don't laugh. It really was true. And somebody called me sweep a chimney. And I said to my wife, I said, honey, I'm going to sweep a chimney. I'm going to get $35. We're going shopping when I get home. We're going to have a real supper tonight. She said, oh, that's good. That's good. She said, what time are you going to be home? I said, oh, I don't know. Just as soon as I can. So I went, swept the chimney. And this lady paid me $35. Man, I hurried home. I was covered with soot. I ran in the door. I stopped right in the door. There was fried chicken, cauliflower and broccoli steaming, mashed potatoes. I said, where did you get all this? She said, at the dump. She said, I went out to take the trash, and about the time I got there, the guy owned the grocery store backing up, dumping all this. It's still cold. Hallelujah. That was the place that both of us felt was one of our favorite places. After all these years, that place that almost killed us. Now, we're dipping honey up out of there. We're dipping honey up out of there every once in a while. The lions in your life. Daniel was cast into the den of lions. Do you remember that? And the king said, Daniel, after he passed the night fasting, He came to the mouth of the den. He said, Daniel, thou whom servest the Lord continually, or something like that. He said, is thy God able to deliver thee from the lions? Daniel said, O king, live forever. That's a sweet attitude to have about the guy that threw you to the lions. He says, the Lord has sent his angel, and he shut the mouth of the lions, and upon me there is no hurt. I'm just telling you tonight that the things in your life that you think at the moment are going to kill you may someday be a source of refreshment later on, when you realize the power of God to help you get your foot on the lions in your life. What is it that's been bugging you? What is it that's threatening to get your foot on it by the power of God? Let's hurry on to the adder. Now, while the lion will attack from a frontal position, the adder, we're told, is a heel biter. The adder is a heel biter. What does the adder represent to us tonight? Writers say that the adder was really not very big at all. You think about this huge snake that maybe would swallow the concert grand during the service or something. It wasn't like that at all. It was a small little snake, about as long as a lead pencil and about as big around as a number 9 wire. And yet this thing packed a powerful punch. People who would be bit by the adder would fall dead in just a little while, we're told. What does the adder represent to us? While the lion would represent the sudden and crushing tragedies that come in upon people, the adder represents your temptation, the evil plan by Satan to tempt you to be bitter about something or someone. Some people find themselves prey to the poison of gossip and evil surmising. Some time ago, a young man called me. He said, Brother Mitchell, have you heard the news? I said, no, I haven't. He said, it's absolutely terrible. And he told me this big story. I said, you know what? I do not believe that. I refuse to believe that. And I said, you better not tell anybody that, because it is probably not true. And you're going to find out it's not true. And then you've told a bunch of people. And he hem-hawed all around and hung up. Well, I didn't tell anybody. But weeks later, I heard that it was true. And I don't know that anybody in here would even know about it. I don't know. I doubt it. And when I found out it was true, I cried. I cried because it broke my heart. But I've not told anybody yet. I've not been a part of a chain that's sending bad news on. I've just refused to do it. I refuse to do it. A lot of people find themselves prey to the poison of gossip and evil surmising. A lot of people surmise things. I remember one time I'd just been to a garage sale. Imagine that. And I was coming home, man. I had got myself some suitcases. I love suitcases. I absolutely love them. At one point, I had like 40 or 50 of them. And I started selling them off because they started getting valuable. You've seen them in all the magazines. They pile them up, and women put stuff on them and make them look real cute. Man, I cashed in on that phase. And I've only got maybe 10 now. That's all I got left. But and I bought these suitcases, and I was pastoring then, and I had a station wagon car, and my suitcases, man, I was so proud of them. I got all of them for like $3. And I had them all lined up in my car. And I turned a corner, and just as I did, out of the corner of this eye, I saw a man that attended my church, but not quick enough to say hi or how are you doing or anything like that. It all happened so quick. And then I realized, oh, that guy attends my church. But I didn't think anything else about it. Zoom, I just went on. Well, Sunday morning comes, and I come up the steps to the church, and the Sunday school superintendent meets me on the porch. He said, Brother Mitchell, he said, you're here. I said, I usually come on Sunday mornings. He says, we need to talk. He said, something's wrong. We need to talk. So we went in my study, which was in the back of the sanctuary off the foyer, and I shut the door and I said, what's going on? He said, you're not supposed to be here today. I said, I'm not? Where am I supposed to be? He said, I don't know. But you're not supposed to be here. He said, we've got a visiting minister today. I said, why? He said, because you're not going to be here. He said, Brother Mitchell, I don't mind telling you, there's several people in church that are, he said, they're angry. I said, what about? Because you wasn't coming today. I said, I don't understand this. He said, I don't either. But he said, it's a mess. I said, well, what supposedly happened? He said, well, somebody saw you leaving town with your car full of suitcases. And they called different ones in the church and said you was gone to Indiana or somewhere and wasn't even going to be home Sunday. And left us sitting without a preacher. And said different ones got together and called somebody to fill in and said, he's sitting in there. I said, who hired him? He said, well, so-and-so hired him. I said, go get him. So he went and got them. I said, did you hire this guy? He said, yeah. He said, you wasn't going to be here. I said, who told you I wasn't? He said, well, so-and-so said that. I said, yeah, none of that's true. I said, I've just been to a garage sale. I said, you hired this guy? He said, yeah. I said, you got any money? He said, why? I said, you're fixing to pay him. I said, the church isn't. I'm not. You are. He said, I am? I said, you're going to pay him. So he sat down and wrote out a check. He said, you're going to give it to him? I said, no, you are. You hired him. You go in there and tell him, our preacher's here. He's got a message. He's always had a message. He's never been anywhere. And we're sorry, we're not going to need you, but we're going to give you this love offering right here. I said, that's what I want you to say. So he went out and did it. And when I come out of my study and come up on the platform, you could have knocked that bunch over with a feather. Evil surmising. That's what that's called. You just thought something, and you put it over as the truth. You need to get on that adder. You need to get up on top of that. A lot of people are playing host to bitterness. All across the holiness movement, there's bitter people. So-and-so's in revival. We're not going over there. Why? We're not going over here to him. We're not going over that camp. We're not going here. We're not going there. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. It's kind of sickening. It's all about the adder. It's all about the adder. Some people allow themselves to come under the poisonous grasp of the adder and bitterness and jealousy when they didn't get asked to do something, or when they weren't promoted, or when they didn't get a better car, or when they didn't get to go on a vacation. It's amazing how people are prone to the bitterness of the adder. Jealousies creep in the church. Bitterness creeps in, begins to work its will. Some time ago, I was in a camp meeting, and the crowd was probably maybe about the size of this, or somewhere around maybe 400 to 500, I don't know. And one night, I preached an entire message just on bitterness. And when I got done, here's what I said. I said, you know what? I have a feeling some of you are battling bitterness in your life. And I wish you'd just get up right now and just come to the altar right now. And out of a crowd of about 400 to 500, 75 people just stood almost as one and ran to the altar. I mean, such weeping and carrying on you have never heard in your life. And I said, dear Lord, help us. In a holiness camp meeting, 75 people were battling bitterness in their life at that moment. I went down to the altar, and there was a young man down there that was crying so hard he was shaking. And I said, boy, what is wrong? What's wrong? He said, Brother Mitchell, I've been so angry with the church my dad used to pastor. He said, they treated my dad wrong. He was not in the wrong. He had done nothing wrong, and they attacked him and ran us out in the middle of the conference year. And he said, every time I close my eyes, he said, I see those people. I see what they did to my dad. I've watched him suffer. And he said, Brother Mitchell, I can't live like this anymore. It's killing me. I can't live with all this bitterness in my heart. I've got to get rid of it. Wow. Years later, I saw him in one of our southern states. He come running up to me. He said, Brother Mitchell, you remember me? Ooh, I said, I don't know. That's what I say when I don't remember you. He said, I was that boy that was at the altar. I said, yeah, tell me more. I pray with a lot of boys at the altar. He said, I was bitter about my dad. I said, oh, I remember you now. He said, Brother Mitchell, I want to tell you that night, God did something for me. He said, every bit of that bitterness rolled out of me that night, and I have never been the same. He said, I'm a principal of a Christian day school, and I'm happy in the Lord. But he said, that bitterness was just about to get me that night. Bitterness. In the book of Acts, let's run over there for a little while. The book of Acts, chapter 28, we read these words. Acts 28. Now, we're talking now about the shipwreck of Paul. Paul, all of you know, was on this boat, and the Lord revealed to him that the ship was going to be lost, but that everybody would be saved. And the storm came up and tore this boat all to pieces, and everybody's floating on pieces of the wreckage. But God had promised Paul that everybody on board would be saved, and they were. They floated up on pieces of the ship. They swam to shore. And Paul said, well, he said, the island that we came up to was full of barbarians. He's not very politically correct, is he? He said they were just full of barbarians, but he said they were nice barbarians. They showed us no little kindness. They kindled a fire, and different ones began to bring up things to put on the fire, possibly pieces of the ship that had washed up, possibly driftwood and other plants that had died that lay along the edges sometimes of these places. They're going to burn this, and everybody's cold and wet, and they've been saved from the terror of this shipwreck, and no doubt they counted heads and found out everybody was there, and yet they're all cold and damp and wet, and these barbarians have kindled this fire, and everybody's gathering one more stick to put on there to make the fire a little bigger, and Paul had gathered up a bundle of sticks, and when he laid them on the fire, a viper came out of that fire and latched itself on the hand of Paul. Whoa, those barbarians step back and they says, whoa, now, this guy must be a murderer. He must have done something horrible. And even though he has escaped the perils of the sea, the gods, little g, are going to see to it now that he's going to get his just due, because that is a poisonous snake right there, and in a little while, he's going to be dead. And you know what Paul did? Paul just shook that thing off back into the fire. And they were watching for him to fall over dead, and he didn't. And then they said, whoa, this dude's a god. Isn't it amazing how crazy people are? One minute, he's a murderer, must be a murderer. Next, he's God. Paul has shook this viper off, and there's no hurt found upon him. Young people, that's what you got to do when bitterness knocks at your door. Bitterness is going to creep up to the door of the sanctified person. And the sanctified person's going to find an adder sneaking up behind them. The adder of poison, of evil surmising, bitterness, and anything else. The devil wants to get you bitter over anything that might have happened or didn't happen in your life. But what you've got to do when that thing fastens itself on you, you've got to do what Paul did. Shake it down. Get away from it. Get your foot on it. The venomous beast of bitterness has fastened itself on too many people in our movement. But hallelujah for the promise that the adder shall come under our tread. Talk is cheap. Gossip abounds. We got more ways to gossip than we've ever had. We used to play a game in youth group, NYPS, Nazarene Young People Society. They'd get all of us teens in the choir loft, maybe 35 or 40. And on the first row, the youth leader would whisper some little story to the first person. And then he would say, now, young people, I want you to try to keep this as accurate as you can as you pass it down. And people would whisper the little story that the youth leader told them. It went all the way up through the rows of the choir loft till it got clear up in the top corner. The youth leader went up and said, now, I want you to come down and tell what the story is. And first he would read. He would read the story to us. And everybody would just laugh. And then he'd say, now, what do you say the story is? And whoever was the last one would tell the story, and it was nothing like it. It didn't even resemble it. Talk is cheap. And there's more ways to do it than there's ever been. Cell phones. Email. That's kind of outdated, isn't it? Email. Facebook. Twitter. All this stuff. People say, yeah, I just ate a bologna sandwich. Who cares? I don't need to know what you ate. I don't need to know where you've been shopping. I don't need to know what you bought unless it was at a garage sale and it's something valuable. I'll listen on that. But I want to tell you, we are so nosy anymore. We are so nosy. And we know so much about everybody. People sit in church and text. So-and-so's here. Text back. Is their wife with them? No. Where's she? Don't know. Are you enjoying the service? Not really. Who's preaching? Rollin Mitchell. Heard him. Underline. Who's winning the game? It's ridiculous. And all this is just a big source of gossip in the holiness movement. You better back off some of that. It's a venomous thing. Behold the conquering tread. You can get your foot on that. You can get your foot on it. Let's hurry on. We gotta do the dragging in before we stop. The last beast that I want to talk about tonight is the dragon. We're back to Psalm 91. We've been all over Robin Hood's barn, but we're back to Psalm 91. And the dragon is, well, has anybody ever seen a dragon? Let's put it that way. A snake, we can understand. The lion we've seen in the zoo, so on and so forth. But has anybody ever seen a dragon? I've only seen one. And I was delirious when I saw him. I left my church on a Sunday night. My general superintendent got in the car with me, and we drove all night Sunday night to El Dorado, Kansas, to meet a church board out there. And we got there sometime Monday. I mean, we drove all night and all day Monday and pulled up in El Dorado, Kansas, Monday afternoon about 4:30. We met this church board, and somebody said, well, we fixed a meal for you. And we said, yeah, we're up for that. So we went to their house and ate. And I thought, man, any minute now I'm going to crawl in bed and sleep like a baby. And my general superintendent looked over at me and he says, why don't we go home tonight? I said, now? I said, we've been up all night and all day. He says, we can save $46 if we don't stay in a motel tonight. I said, wow, let's do it. So we jumped back in my car and headed back to Indiana like a couple idiots. And I mean, about the time I got to the Indiana-Illinois line, I mean, I'm just looking all around and I don't know what's going on. And all at once, there's a place over there where the road kind of makes not a real sharp bend, but kind of a gradual one. And there's big round reflectors about the size of the bottom of a quart can on this thing. And I jumped back from the steering wheel and I said, there's a dragon in the road. I mean, I saw it. He said, pull over. He'd been dozing away all time. He said, you're not driving no more. That's not a dragon, that's a guardrail. That's the only dragon I ever saw. Now, we know that the Bible mentions dragons, and there are any number of people here that could tell us what this is all about tonight. All that I know too much about dragons is what I read in mythology in high school. There's a terrible dragon threatening the village. And whoever kills him, he breathes fire. Whoever kills him will get to marry the princess and live happily ever after. The girls are saying, whoa, bring the dragons back. Yet we know there were beasts in the Bible that were referred to as dragons. I have no idea exactly what they were, but they must no longer exist on the earth. But what does this mean for us today? Actually, the dragon will stand for the things in our lives that are mythical also. The things that may happen, but never do. More lives are shadowed by this creature than any other. The things that might happen. You might fail the class. You might not be able to pay your school bill. You might not get to come back next semester. You might this, you might that. You might lose your job. You might lose your health. You might lose your house. I could list you tonight a notebook page full of good holiness people that have lost their home during this downturn. They were just overextended at the wrong time. They were good people, hard-working people, but they'd bought a little bit too much equipment, counted on some jobs that fell flat when the housing market collapsed. And I know men that used to have their own construction company that lost everything they had, and they're working as a laborer under somebody else because they were just overextended at the wrong time in the economy. You might lose your house. You might lose your retirement in one fatal swoop. Your car might quit. Now, for some of you, this isn't a dragon. This may be a lion. Your car might quit. You drive along in the car, and when you get home, you're laying down in the bed, and all at once the enemy says, "Did you hear that noise in the car?" Yeah. That transmission's fixing to go out. It might. Done went out twice already. Yeah, it might. Well, you're going to get about halfway to your next meeting. You're going to be sitting along the road with that trailer. You're not going to even get there. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Your children might backslide. The church might go down. The pastor might leave. Or the pastor might stay. Where were you when 9/11 happened? We do all this kind of stuff. Where was I when John F. Kennedy was shot? I was in a furniture store in Franklin, Indiana with my mom and dad. Where was I when this happened? When Nixon died, I was in Florida. Just da-da-da. We all remember where we were when things happened. When 9/11 happened, I was putting drywall on a ceiling in Springport, Indiana, 12-foot drywall. And, I was sitting there. I had this drywall jack, and I'm helping a friend of mine. And this dude comes running over from next door. He says, an airplane has hit one of the World Trade Towers. It's on fire. I said, that's terrible. I didn't tell him, but I had never heard of the World Trade Towers. Never heard of them. I've lived a sheltered life. I've never heard of the World Trade Towers. I didn't know there were two of them. I didn't know how tall they were. I didn't know anything about them. So I thought, that's terrible. Oh my, that's terrible. He comes running back over. He said, another plane has hit the other one and they're crashing to the ground. I said, wow, there's two of those? Yeah. Oh, it's terrible. He said, you guys ought to come over and see it. I said, no, I'm busy. I can't come over and see that. But I said, oh, that's bad. That's terrible. I could just imagine all that happening. Didn't really know in my mind what it was, but I knew it sounded awful. He comes running back over. He said, a plane has hit the Pentagon. It's on fire. We're at war. I said, I think I'm going home. And I started gathering up my tools. Man, I was as nervous as a cat on a hot tin roof. The Pentagon, that's our bastion of safety. I'm out of here. He comes running back again. He said, there's another plane headed for the White House. They're going to shoot it down right over Pennsylvania. I said, I'm out of here. And I drove home. I went through Newcastle, Indiana. Man, there's cars blocks long waiting to get gas. I said, I'm not waiting in line to pay $1.89 for gas. Drove on home to Carthage. We got one blinker light, one little gas station, a bank. It was open 2.5 days a week till they ran out of money and closed it. And they're block-long lines waiting to get up to our 2 little gas pumps in my town. Man, I was shook up. I got home. My wife was animated. She said, Krista's called. My daughter was in college at Union Bible College. She said, Krista called home and said, gas is $5 a gallon in Westfield. Parents are coming to get their kids. Are we going to get Krista? I said, I don't know yet. I said, we got to wait a little while. I don't know what we're doing. Man, I was all tore up. I said, I got to get down to the gas station. Man, I grabbed every gas can I had on my place. I went out in the chicken house and brought gas cans out. I hadn't seen the light of day for weeks and months. I got my garden tiller, my lawnmower, anything that had a tank on it was in the truck. Man, all my neighbors were out. Have you heard what happened? And now gas is going $5. And the owner of the station came out. He said, folks, don't do this. He said, as far as I know, our prices aren't going up. People said, he's just saying that. He wants us to leave. He's going to sell that gas to somebody else. And we all just stayed right there. I filled up every little old can I had, milk jugs and everything. Got me some gas, boy. We're going to be at war. I'm going to have 25, 30 gallon gas around to blow myself up with. I got home and, man, all my preacher friends are calling me and, have you heard what happened? Yeah. What do you think? Oh, I don't know. My brother-in-law's got a television, and he saw this here. And they were telling me what their brother-in-law saw on his television. Man, I turn on my radio. I'm sitting by the radio listening for news. Who attacked us? What's going on? About 3 o'clock in the morning, man, I'm so bleary-eyed I can't even hold my head up anymore. I've listened to all these news reports, heard all these phone calls. I'm going to lay down on the bed. I'm going to sleep. I'm not going to sleep. All I can think about is that $5 gas. What are we going to do? And all at once I thought, man, $5 gas. I was pastoring a church then, 30 miles from my house. I said, let's see, $5 gas. If my people have to pay $5 a gallon for gas, they won't be able to afford to go to work. If they don't get paid, they won't have any tithe to put in. If they don't have any tithe, the church won't have any money. If the church don't have any money, I won't get paid. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my house. Man, I'd begin to mourn over the loss of my old house. I said, Lord, I thought you gave me this house. Why are you taking it from me? And then I thought, you know what? I own the half lot next door to me, free and clear. Don't have any mortgage on it, and it has a chicken house on it. And during the night, in my deluded state of half awake, half asleep, I was moving into the chicken house. I pulled my travel trailer over there. In my deluded state, I moved all my stuff over there. I put a fence down. The banks took my house, but they didn't get my water line. It's on the half lot. And I mean, this is how it went all night long. And the next morning, I was like this. I'd moved all night. I said, how am I going to get to church? I'll ride my bicycle. Don't you laugh. I think I could do it. After I had my heart attack, the doctor had me riding. I was up to 14 miles a day till I quit. I probably could have made it, but then I thought, how am I going to get my wife there? And I saw myself sleeping on the padded pews, eating snack food, staying the night at the church because I couldn't afford to drive. I mean, it was a terrible night. And you know what? None of that ever happened. A day or two later, gas went back down. They pressed charges on people that was gouging people. My daughter never even came home from UBC. Nobody in my church lost their job. I'm still living in the house. I've never moved into that chicken house yet. You know what? That night took years off my life. Because I was trying to fight a dragon that didn't even exist. And that's what many of us do. We lay awake in the watches of the night and we're trying to slay a dragon that doesn't even exist. When I was a little boy, I used to be very scared of lots of things. And one night, my mama had put me to bed and tottered off down the hall to wherever their room was. And all at once, I saw a man pointing a gun at me. And he scared me really bad. He was huge. And I screamed bloody murder. And I said, he's going to kill me! My mama ran in, turned on the light. She said, what's going on? I said, there's a man in here with a gun. He's going to kill me. Pointed his gun right at me. She said, there's no man in here. She said, where is he? I said, he was right over there. She opened all the closets, pulled out the drawers, and held me up to look in them, and showed me under the bed. No man. She tucked me back in. She turned off the light, got about halfway down. I said, there he is again! That Christmas, I had got a Johnny West doll for Christmas. You remember her, them? They were the macho version of Barbie and Ken. Okay, Ken was a little pansy. But Johnny West was a cowboy. And you got a gold chest full of gold bags, a rifle, all kind of neat stuff with him. Well, he was sitting on my dresser, and I had put his gun in his hand and had his arm pointing out like that. And when Mom turned off the light, the moon shining through my bedroom window showed his shadow on the wall on the other side of my room, and he was as big as an adult man. And that's what the devil does. He magnifies something in your life and has you worried all about it and worried what's going to happen and waste away time in your life. The dragon. What are you going to do when the dragon comes? And this, I'm going to close with this. It's way past time. Isaiah 26:3. If you don't need this tonight, you will someday. So turn over there and get your pencil out and get ready to mark it up. Isaiah 26:3. Here's what it says. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. What you've got to do next time, and ever since the Lord revealed this to me, I have been a worrier ever since I was a little boy. I've just worried about everything and just got sick over things. And after the Lord revealed this truth to me, my wife will tell you my life has been different. I used to worry about everything. I drove her crazy, worried about stuff that never was going to happen, never did happen, wasn't even about to happen, but I was convinced it was. Here's what you got to do. You got to decide, first of all, is this issue with you, is it a lion? Is it real? Is it something that's really happened? When you get a pink slip in your check that says, this is your last day of work, that's a lion. That's not a dragon. You've got to decide, is this some piece of gossip? Or is this a tendency toward me to be bitter about this? You've got to sort this out. See which beast you're up against. And when you determine that this is a dragon, that absolutely there's really no basis for it, then here's what you've got to do. You've got to bring that to the Lord. Lord, there's another dragon in my room. There's a dragon in my room, and there's a little bit of basis to it. Here's what I know. And put the facts out before the Lord. Lord, here's what's happened. So-and-so lost their job, and you know, the economy is bad, and I may lose mine. They've lost theirs. That's all I know right now. You got to get the facts out. And what you got to do is put the facts out and say, Lord, I refuse to go any further than the facts that I have before me right now. I'm going to lay this condition in your lap. I'm not going to conjure up ghostly images of what might happen or what could happen, but I'm going to lay the real trouble as I know it now before you, and there I'm going to stop. My imagination has to come to a halt right here. I'm going to keep my mind on you, and I decline to go any further with this than that. That is the only way you can stop the dragons in your life. Let's stand together tonight.
We're glad you joined us. God's Bible School and College prepares students for lives of ministry wherever God calls them. This content is possible because of the generous support of friends like you. To support GBSC, visit giving.gbs.edu. Thank you.